from 2001 to 2010. Amid widespread dissatisfaction by constituents, she was sidelined in 2010, allowing, some say the partnership wrested the seat from the PNM by 371 votes. It went to the COP MP Roger Samuel. And again, she went up before the screening committee. It was the second time. 2010 was the second time that the PNM lost a seat. It went to the NER in 1986. Again, she went before the screening committee ahead of the 2015 elections, nominated by 30 party groups in Arima. She was turned down. And I think in preliminary discussions with Mrs. Beckles-Robinson, this fight, and for want of a better word, fight, this is coming from the Constituency Executive, and I'd like very much to quote from Dr. Paula Mark this morning, right? She's reported as saying that the process that went through to arrive at a candidate has gone to naught. This is the issue. It is not about getting Penny Beckles. Once more, their rights have been trampled on. The party is saying the membership is not capable of choosing a candidate. And PNM General Secretary Ashton Ford responded to that by saying, we had a General Council meeting in Tobago on February 21st. They did not attend. There are processes in the party that they can go through to be able to arrest this. But before we put all of this into context again, Mr. Bishop, Mrs. Beckles-Robinson has been out of the news since, she's been lying very low since the battle for leadership of the People's National Movement, and she was not just resting, but she would allow us to tell you that she's lost both her father and her sister in a life-changing event. And as we tell Penny, she's been going through the refiner's fire, but she is here as Penny as ever. So welcome, Mrs. Beckles-Robinson, to Brunch on 107.7.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure. I mean, I hope you don't feel jealous because,
Mr. Bishop.
Yeah. It's so good to know you're back home.
It's good to be back home. And
I hope it's permanent.
It's going to be permanent. I look at the work you have done, and I should congratulate you, albeit late, being the first woman to ever be elected Deputy Speaker in the House of Parliament in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. That's indeed a major contribution. And reading through all that you have done, you've been resolved to making it better for, not just for women, making it better for the party, but moving forward with the business of the people. Now, the frustration expressed by some 30 groups who supported you has allowed the tone and the articulating of vote no. Folks are saying they're not voting if Penny is not there. I go to the area of your seniority in the party, your knowledge of politics, and you are very much aware that if this conversation goes on, when people don't vote, they vote for people they don't want. How do you step in and heal that? I know you have a lot to say as to the circumstances here, but you must be looking at the bigger picture, as I'm sure you are. How do we get folks to understand if the process does not work for them immediately, that they find a way to tweak it later on, as against pulling out of it?
Well, what I'll say is that I'm aware that there was a meeting with the chairman and the lady vice chairman of the party. I read somewhere that Mr. Ford said that no complaint was filed by the executive, and I know for a fact that a letter was sent. That's as much as I'll say now, because they have clearly, as members of the executive, made a decision to bring into the public domain certain things, and I'm sure following his response and the letter that was received and was acted upon, that they probably will have some further discussions, But, I think members of the executive got a directive from the general membership, and I think they have carried that out.
I've tried, and we have discussed this, Sharmain, when we were looking at it. We're not going to pull you into who said what and who said what, because that really serves no purpose. But because anyone who has looked to your resolve and see what you have done in the party, attempted to do in the party, will understand there's a great fear that if you have a no-vote campaign going on among this enchanted people, that you run into a situation of never being able to capture the seat. And if, in fact, you win it by a small area, that whole question of that 51% becomes a serious issue. The runoff I'm referring to.
Well, the runoff legislation hasn't been passed. I don't know. It has been passed. They haven't gone through the process of having it assented to. Mm-hmm. Those are questions that need to be asked by the public. what is the government really doing? It's quite a couple months since that legislation has passed through the Senate and the House, and seemed to have been on the back burner, and that created so much debate in the absence of people feeling that there wasn't sufficient consultation, and it affects a whole number of things. So I'm not sure where that is and how that is going to impact on the outcome of the election.
As an attorney at law, I thought I would raise that at this point because you will understand that it can lay dormant until the most inopportune time presents itself.
Oh, sure.
And become a serious problem.
Yeah.
Sharmain?
Penny, you've only recently challenged Dr. Rowley for leadership of the party.
Yeah, it's almost a year, yes.
Well, it is recent in our history, right?
Yes,
It's just
yes,
right there. And
yeah.
it's a more or less a landmark thing because before that, I think it was Dr. Rowley who challenged Mr. Manning
Yeah,
for leadership.
I would have been the first female to make that challenge in the party's almost 60-year history, yes.
What are therefore, you will always be, in the eyes of the party and the people, a leadership contender.
Yes.
So therefore, what are the issues today that as we're heading into general elections, there's this whole political landscape now, and therefore you would have your vision of or direction for the PNM, right? What are the issues that you think we should be discussing now? What's your vision? What were you taking to the table?
Okay, well, because we are going into a general election, of course, bringing that to the forefront now is I don't think it's the best thing. If only because, I've accepted the fact that you have a leader and he's been successful, and for me, I think that's what is important in terms of the party moving forward. During my campaign, of course, I articulated what I thought was important. Some of his views would have been similar, but, I've been in politics a long time, and the truth is that it's not so much the issues, I think, is how we do things. I think it's the whole issue of the processes. One of the things that I have been very passionate about is the sort of politicization of everything. If you have to get a house grant, a pension, that you have to go to the hospital, you need cataract surgery, you need to get your children transferred. I focus a lot of that in my campaign, that I think we need to remove that politicization and have people believe that we've got processes in place where, we really need to work on just delivery of services, and have people stop believing that whatever is done has to come through the political process. For me, I think that is pretty big on the delivery of services to people. I believe that we've got to stop boasting about things that we deliver and realize that people are really frustrated about what they go through to get certain basic amenities in Trinidad and Tobago. It's pretty painful.
I'm going to lean on your experience on this because I really need help with it. I personally have problems with it. If I have 30 groups supporting me and somebody's got 2, I thought the process, because you did mention process, I would think it's an automatic that that person should be in. It is not. It leaves me very disquieted to hear someone say, well, as long as you are you're voted in by one party, obviously everybody's got an even chance. I'm totally confused on that. Help me.
Well, that system existed for quite a while in the party. In other words, that one group really allows you to be screened. So that in other words, what they're saying is once you get a nomination from one group, you can be screened. The issue then becomes who becomes a candidate.
Yes, what the groundswell is.
Yes.
The groundswell must account for a lot more than just your democratic process, as you say, or your process of inclusion.
Well, I think that's the point that the executive is making, that, whether or not there is some trust issue in terms of the membership, the wider membership, being able to select a person of their choice. One of the things that came out of both the convention would have been the one man, one vote. And to his credit, Dr. Rowley was the person that championed that, where you remove the delegate system. But, in the Caribbean, Rennie and Sharmain, we are not like a number of the European countries, Britain, France, India, Pakistan, where the party itself has that sort of strength that is separate and distinct from when you're in government and when you're in opposition. The party says X, the party says X. And, mean, that is something that exists throughout the Caribbean. It's not exclusive to Trinidad and Tobago. But I believe that certainly as we continue to grow as a party and as a nation, we would see that those are issues that would continue to pop up. I mean, we are the longest party that has remained the PNM in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's dynamic. Things are happening. It's unfortunate that sometimes when people see you take a different position, that sometimes they believe that you're either disloyal or other things, which in truth and in fact is not so. But I believe that even coming from the Eric Williams era, where he took a lot of time to explain things to the public and explain his vision and why he was doing certain things, and even from CLR James Robinson, coming down the ladder, all sorts of things happen. So, I am, for me, this year has started very challenging. With my sister dying in January and my father. So there are lots of things that I have to do as a result of that, and I am really, you recognize and reflect that, when these things happen, family is very important, and I am focusing right now on getting some of those things sorted out and realizing that the politics will always be there, the party will always be there, but your family certainly would not always be there.
We would be privileged on any day to have you here, but we are very doubly thankful that
Sure.
under these circumstances that you took the time to come in here this morning, keeping in mind with what you said about the party staying pure to its mission. There is conversation we have heard that there may be some kind of accommodation. How do you feel about parties linking with other parties to form a coalition government or a I like to call it Association of Convenience or APP, that sort of thing? How do you feel about parties merging? I.e., are you disposed, if the conversation came up for the PNM to get together with the Alliance of Independence, for instance, or some like minds, some minds of that form?
Well, I know that Dr. Rowley made it very clear that he had received permission from the General Council of the party to speak with other parties and or organizations that may have interest in certain issues, because there have been meetings that have been held with the MSJ, with the trade union movement, when there were certain things, Section 34 and others. But separate and distinct from whether or not the PNM should be involved in coalition is the acceptance that when you look at the development of politics worldwide, a lot of organizations who initially, and if we go to the British system as an example, in the last elections where, the government of the day had never been involved in coalition, and they just sat and said, well, the Queen is going to appoint us. And they refused to speak with the Liberal Democrats and then found themselves being out of office.
Yes.
There are a number of, you look at what is happening even in Germany with Merkel, even very small parties. India is a classic case where, and Pakistan, where a number of smaller parties have been able to improve and really grow over time, simply because the dominant parties have not been able to have sufficient votes to form the government.
So you are disposed to an accommodation if
well, the reality is that whether one is disposed to or not, I'm saying that if you are a student of politics or a practitioner of politics, you may not want to do it. The PNM's policy has always been lose alone, win alone. But I've heard a slight difference now in terms of that situation. If you look at what is happening in Guyana now, Guyana won't even be able to elect a speaker, simply because, people have talked about proportional representation, but it has its pluses and it has its negatives. If you look at what has happened in Venezuela, where you win your president election by 51 point something and somebody loses by 49 point something. Those are societies that must be in turmoil. So the issue is, we discuss all sorts of things in Trinidad, but we need to recognize that when you look at the data and you look at the base of the respective parties, that a lot of those parties, your base isn't improving. If your base isn't improving, it means to say that you may not want to. If we go to the 17-17-2 scenario, for example, and if we go to how Robinson became the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, there are those of us who argue that you've never had coalitions prior to this last government, but that in truth and in fact is not so.
Disillusionment and disconnect with their parties is one of the reasons the base, I believe, is not growing.
Yes.
And what is it that is not being done that hitherto worked? Why the disconnect? Why the disillusionment? Why are people not believing politicians or believing the message of a party anymore?
Well, I mean, the number of pollsters have suggested that figure of which you speak, that those persons of which you speak are as much as 41%. That's pretty large for a small country to have 41% of people undecided. And that the race between the other two parties are continuing to be very close. I don't know that sufficient research is being done. I'm not going to be an expert as to why that is happening. All I would say as a politician myself, it is a source of concern that people are continuing to lose faith in us, and that people seem to be trusting you less, and people obviously equate politicians with the word corrupt. I mean, I don't think it's a nice profession to be involved in when people so with almost with a permanent sort of pronouncement that all politicians are corrupt. I think what it does not encourage a number of young people who want to serve the country and who want to make a difference to get involved in politics, and even older people, mature people who may have a vision for a different country and a better nation, don't want that kind of label. And I think therein lies the challenge, not just for the political parties, but for the country as a whole.
A pragmatist that you are, you said, it's not that you want or what you're disposed to, is what you must do. There is a problem with that because, it's a reality. When you have people of different ideals coming together for what some folks may want to call an unholy alliance, when you have that happening, you're not looking at doing anything for the country, for the nation. You really don't, because after you get the power, then everybody starts fighting with everybody. It is not unique to here, as you said. It happens all over the world, and invariably the populace, the country suffers.
Well, it's clear because you have seen, for example, in this government where the MSG left, the differences with Jack Warner, and even the differences amongst themselves where the prime ministers had to fire so many of her ministers because of differences. But, the truth is that if you cannot form a government because you do not have sufficient, I'm saying in instances like that, you don't have a choice. So that is a reality that you're going to have to face. Ideally, you want to have coalitions where the vision and the mission and the policy and the ideology are similar. But if it is that it does not happen and governance and government must take place, then I'm saying that you don't have a choice save and except you have a different kind of political system that allows that to happen. And unfortunately, whilst we have been speaking about constitutional change for the last couple decades, we have been doing it in very small portions, and we talk about it every time a new party gets into government, but you have not had those kinds of changes that reflect the sort of development and the sort of direction that I think a lot of people want to. And that's why I think the undecided voters are growing.
Let me hold on to what I'm proud of. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Penelope Beckles-Robinson, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, our time is running out. You've got something on your sleeve there that I have to ask you about. Do the right thing, and I think that means go out and vote. What would you leave with those in Arima who...
do the right thing has to do with domestic violence.
Could you let me twist this thing and not let the truth get in the way?
No, I won't. You sound like a politician, really. That's not good. Couldn't help that, Sharmain.
What is your feeling? What is your feeling about the viability of the party with the challenges that some of which we articulated and some we have not? What are the chances you think of the PNM getting a hold of that seat in Arima?
Well, there's still a lot of time as far as I'm concerned in the politics. I don't know that any political party in relation to any seat can claim victory. Yes, people very easily the pollsters seem to be saying, well, this is clear, which is PNM, which is which is PP, but we have seen people taking different positions. I mean, you now have a very literate population. You have a younger population that are looking for different things. You have people now who understand a lot more about the value of their vote. And when people understand about the value of their vote, I think politicians need to stop taking them for granted.
I think they should also stop taking for granted the unimpeachable source called pollsters that you mentioned.
Well, yes.
Tongue in cheek.
Well, that may be so, but I mean, the fact is that all over the world, there are people who, if they do the right thing and do the polling right, will give you the right data. Unfortunately, there are those who are corrupted and would want to influence how people vote and therefore give you wrong information.
Indeed.
That's a totally different matter.
Indeed.
But I think that, like everything else, we need to be data-driven, and it's not just in the politics. I think it's in policy. I think it's in the development of your country. It's really, really important. And, we don't have much time, but I just want to say I congratulate you and Sharmain for, basically going in a different direction and doing a lot more education, about it. I mean, I'd like to come and talk about some other things, the economy, and focus a little more on women's issues and youth issues, which I feel are as important as some of the things that we talk about.
Some folks say be careful what you ask for. I say be careful what you promise. We'll be calling you very shortly.
Yeah, okay, good.
I thank you so much.
Sure. Great.
I thank you for having a very pleasant weekend. And again, we are with you on your trials, and we will stay in touch.
Thank you.